a leader formed by faith, not fame. Salahuddin Ayyubi was not born into greatness as history usually defines it. There were no prophesies of empire attached to his name, no childhood tales of a boy obsessed with swords and glory. He was born in 1137 in the city of Tikrit, into a Kurdish Sunni Muslim family known more for discipline and piety than ambition. His father, Najm ad-Din Ayyub, and his uncle, Shirkuh, served as military men. But in their household, power was always secondary to faith. From an early age, Salahuddin's world was shaped not by dreams of conquest, but by the steady rhythm of Islamic learning. He studied the Quran with seriousness, memorized hadith, and learned the principles of Islamic law and ethics. These teachings did not merely fill his mind, they molded his character. He was taught that authority was an emanah, a trust from Allah, and that every action carried accountability beyond this world. While other young men sought fame and recognition, Salahuddin was quiet, reflective, and deeply conscious of right and wrong. Unlike many legendary warriors, Salahuddin showed little interest in military life during his youth. He preferred books to battlefields and scholarship to swords. Those who knew him early on did not see a future conqueror, but a thoughtful young man grounded in humility. Yet destiny placed him in an age where faith was under siege and leadership was desperately needed. His first real exposure to warfare came not by desire but by duty. He accompanied his uncle Shirkuh on military campaigns under the great Muslim leader No ad-Din Zengi. These experiences became his true classroom. On the battlefield and in the courts of power, Salahuddin witnessed something deeply troubling. The Muslim world was fractured by ego, rivalry, and corruption. Leaders competed for control, while the Crusaders advanced with ruthless unity. These lessons left a lasting mark on him. Rather than hardening his heart, these experiences deepened his sense of responsibility. Salahuddin learned that strength without morality leads only to ruin. He observed No ad-Din closely, absorbing his commitment to justice, simplicity, and Islamic governance. From him, Salahuddin learned that leadership was not about commanding fear, but about serving with integrity. Even as his responsibilities grew, Salahuddin resisted pride. He dressed simply, avoided excess, and remained cautious of praise. His prayers were long, his charity quiet, and his self-discipline firm. He feared Allah more than he desired power, a rare quality in any age. This foundation of faith became the cornerstone of everything Salahuddin would later achieve. Before he became a symbol of chivalry and mercy on the world stage, he was a man who had conquered his own ego. And it was this inner victory, won through faith, humility, and discipline, that prepared him to face far greater trials ahead. True greatness, Salahuddin would prove, begins long before the battlefield. Construct Chapter 2 with 500 words and clear, focused narrative. Power without pride, victory without tyranny. Salahuddin Ayyubi's rise to power was neither carefully planned nor eagerly pursued. It came suddenly, shaped by political chaos and heavy responsibility rather than personal ambition. When his uncle Shirkuh died in Egypt, Salahuddin, still relatively young and underestimated, was appointed vizier of the Fatimid Caliphate. Many saw him as a temporary figure, a weak choice who could be easily controlled. They could not have been more wrong. Egypt at the time was plagued by corruption, internal conspiracies, and sectarian division. The Fatimid state was crumbling, and enemies watched closely for it collapse. Salahuddin entered this unstable world not as a conqueror, but as a reformer. He moved cautiously, understanding that reckless force would only deepen division. Step by step, he restored order by replacing corruption with accountability and fear with justice. One of his first actions was to realign Egypt with Sunni Islam, not through persecution, but through education and gradual reform. He strengthened institutions of learning, supported scholars, and revived Islamic law in a way that rebuilt public trust. Rather than ruling through intimidation, Salahuddin ruled through consistency. His word became reliable, his judgments fair. Despite his growing authority, Salahuddin's personal life remained strikingly simple. He refused luxury, avoided lavish palaces, and lived in a manner closer to his soldiers and to kings. Wealth that came into his hands rarely stayed there. It flowed to the poor, to widows, to orphans, and to those wounded in battle. For him, leadership was not a gateway to indulgence, but a burden he carried with constant awareness of Allah's judgment. As his influence expanded beyond Egypt into Syria and surrounding regions, Salahuddin faced his greatest challenge: not the Crusaders, but Muslim disunity. Rival leaders clung to power, placing ego above the survival of the Ummah. Salahuddin chose unity over domination. Through patience, diplomacy, and when necessary, limited force, he brought fractured Muslim lands under a single banner. He understood that no external enemy could be defeated while internal divisions remained. What set Salahuddin apart was not merely his strategic mind, but his moral restraint. He avoided unnecessary bloodshed, honored treaties, and punished injustice even when committed by his own men. He believed that victory achieved through cruelty was no victory at all. Every decision was weighed against a single question: would this please Allah? Those who served under him did not fear him, they respected him. Soldiers followed him not for wealth, but for trust. Civilians supported him not out of obligation, but gratitude. His authority grew because it was rooted in justice, not terror. By the time Salahuddin stood as the most powerful Muslim leader of his era, he had achieved something far greater than territorial control. He had proven that power could exist without pride, and leadership without tyranny. In a world where rulers ruled by fear, Salahuddin ruled by example, preparing the ground for a moment in history that would soon astonish the entire world. Construct Chapter 3 with 500 words and clear, focused narrative. Jerusalem, the victory that redefined conquest. Jerusalem was not just a city of stone and walls. It was a wound carrot in the memory of the Muslim world. In 1099, nearly a century before Salahuddin Ayyubi approached its gates, Crusader armies had stormed the city and unleashed a massacre so brutal that even contemporary Christian chroniclers recorded it with horror. Muslims and Jews were slaughtered indiscriminately. Blood filled streets, homes, and places of worship. That memory did not fade with time. It lived on as pain, anger, and a deep desire for justice. When Salahuddin defeated the Crusader forces at the Battle of Hattin in 1187, the road to Jerusalem lay open. The Crusader leadership was shattered, their armies broken, and their confidence destroyed. For the first time in generations, Muslims had the opportunity to reclaim their most sacred city. Yet with this victory came a moment of moral testing. Revenge was easy. History expected it. Many demanded it. As Salahuddin's forces surrounded Jerusalem, fear spread rapidly inside the city. The Christian population remembered 1099 well and fully expected the same fate to befall them. Panic took hold. Leaders pleaded, prepared for the worst, and braced for slaughter. But Salahuddin had already made his decision. When the city surrendered, there was no massacre, no rivers of blood, no revenge disguised as justice. Instead, Salahuddin announced terms rooted in Islamic law and prophetic example. Civilians would be spared, lives would be protected, churches would remain untouched. Those who could pay a reasonable ransom would be allowed to leave safely, and those who could not, women, children, the elderly, and the poor, were freed without payment. This mercy was not weakness. It was deliberate, principled strength. Salahuddin modeled his actions on the Prophet Muhammad during the conquest of Mecca, when forgiveness triumphed over vengeance. He understood that Jerusalem could not be purified through cruelty. It had to be reclaimed with justice. Muslim soldiers were strictly ordered not to harm civilians or violate sacred spaces. Discipline was enforced without exception. Even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the most sacred site in Christianity, was protected under Salahuddin's command. He ensured that Christian worship continued peacefully, a decision almost unheard of in medieval warfare. The reaction was immediate and global. News spread across Europe that Jerusalem had fallen, but without bloodshed. Many in the Christian world were stunned. Chroniclers who expected tales of slaughter instead wrote of mercy, honor, and restraint. Salahuddin's name began to carry a meaning far beyond the battlefield. He was no longer seen only as a Muslim general, but as a moral force. Jerusalem was reclaimed, but something greater had occurred. Islam had been represented not through fear, but through character. The city that once witnessed one of history's darkest massacres now witnessed one of its most remarkable acts of mercy. Salahuddin did not merely take Jerusalem. He transformed the very idea of what it meant to conquer. Construct Chapter 4 with 500 words and clear, focused narrative. The enemy who learned Islam through his character. After the fall of Jerusalem, the Crusades did not end. They intensified. Europe responded with renewed fury, launching what would become known as the Third Crusade. At its head stood one of the most feared warriors of the age, Richard I of England, remembered by history as Richard the Lionheart. He was brave, ruthless, and legendary on the battlefield. When Richard arrived in the Holy Land, the world watched as two giants, Salahuddin Ayyubi and Richard the Lionheart, prepared to clash. Their encounters were fierce, yet unlike any war before them. Despite being enemies, a strange respect developed between the two leaders. Richard quickly realized that Salahuddin was not a typical ruler driven by cruelty or ego. This realization became undeniable when Richard fell gravely ill during the campaign. In another age, this weakness would have been exploited mercilessly. Instead, Salahuddin did something that stunned both armies. He sent his personal physician to treat Richard. Along with the doctor came medicine, fresh fruit, and messages wishing him recovery. This act was not diplomacy, it was character. Salahuddin believed that honor did not disappear in war, and that mercy was not reserved only for friends. Through this single act, Islam spoke louder than any sermon. Though neither side achieved total victory, truces were negotiated and honored. Prisoners were treated with dignity. Agreements were upheld. Even when Richard proposed a political marriage to secure peace, Salahuddin responded respectfully, proving again that warfare did not strip him of humanity. When the wars finally settled and time caught up with the great Sultan, Salahuddin Ayyubi fell ill and died in 1193. His death revealed a truth more powerful than any battlefield achievement. After ruling vast territories, leading armies, and shaping history, he left behind almost nothing of material value. His personal wealth was so small that his burial expenses had to be covered by donations. There were no treasures, no hoarded gold, only a legacy. Both Muslim and non-Muslim historians mourned his death. In the West, poets and chroniclers wrote of him with admiration. In the Muslim world, he was remembered not only as a liberator of Jerusalem, but as a ruler who lived and died with integrity. Rarely has a man been so respected by those who once stood against him. Salahuddin never forced conversions. He never ruled through terror. Yet people came to respect Islam because they saw its values live before their eyes. His justice reflected Islamic law. His mercy reflected prophetic character. His humility reflected true faith. Empires collapsed after him. Borders shifted again and again. But Salahuddin's name endured because he did not conquer through fear, but through example. In an age defined by brutality, Salahuddin Ayyubi proved that the greatest victory is not when the enemy is defeated, but when they recognize the truth in your character. Islam did not conquer lands through Salahuddin. It conquered hearts.